about a minute, right? A minute, maybe a couple seconds. Everybody just take a look. It's coming together, it's forming a dough, it's on the dough hook. It still has to clean the bowl, it hasn't totally incorporated, but it's at least coming together. At that point, it's okay if you walk away and go do something else, okay? You have basically maybe 7 minutes at this point before you have to come back and take a look at it. Doesn't mean if you're walking by it, take a look, see how it's doing. But at this point, it should at least come together and not be soupy and not be dry. Okay, it should at least be able to form a dough. It's dissolving the yeast, rehydrating it, okay? All the ingredients are getting mixed, and then at this point it's going to start developing gluten, okay? Put it on 3, do the color. Like I said yesterday, just because you turn up the speed doesn't mean it's going to mix faster, all right? So, the croissants from yesterday. All right, so when you open your croissant dough from the day before mixing it, you should always look to see if it's come up, if it's risen, okay? That means you do have yeast in here. It's another safety mechanism to say, yes, it has risen a little bit overnight because it took a while for it from out of the mixer to chill down in the fridge. So it took probably 2 to 3 hours. So at that point, it was fermenting, okay? So I know it's come up, I can see it's risen. So, and when you open this up, you can start to see some cells, some actual little fermentation, all right? So that means I have yeast, it's working fine. So what you're gonna do first, this is gonna be a key I'm doing to mix the croissant dough. Ooh, a little soft. Okay, so right now I walked by, glanced at it, it's not cleaning the bowl, it's a little soft, so I'm gonna add flour, okay? So either I misscaled something or it's off by maybe an ounce. So let me put an ounce of flour so you can start to see what a little bit of flour does.
Remember we talked about wet dough, that it's easier to add flour to a wet dough than it is adding water to a dry dough. And also just the humidity in the room, the humidity outside can have an impact on your dough as you're mixing. You walk in, it's been raining for 2 or 3 days, it's 100% humidity outside. You come in here, it's 50% humidity, it can have an impact on your dough as well.
So that's 1 ounce of flour. We'll see what 1 ounce of flour does. Keep in mind, most of the time, anytime you have to shape a bread product, soft rolls, baguettes, shape it, it needs to clean the bowl. If it's too wet here, it's going to be a mess on the table. So it needs to clean the bowl. I added 1 ounce of flour, we'll see what happens, okay? This is something we could talk about all day, but you have to learn it, okay? Some things we just can't teach you. You have to learn it and go through it and experience it. Okay, so we'll let this go for a little bit. So is it ready to turn on the mixer for the, within 15 minutes? Okay, so go ahead and turn the mixer on. No, leave it on 1. It's just a little switch. Did it go on? Okay. So we should look at it in about 6-7 minutes, see what happens, okay? All right, and don't forget to do a little research on that auto release. Okay, so it's not all the flour, it's a little better, but I need to add a little bit more.
When you're mixing 2 things, 3 things, 4 things, set your timer. If you try to match up the clock with every little thing, you can even write it down, you might get a little confused. I have timers for my mixing time. You can actually set the timer on the 60 port, or we've got a 8-section timer that we can set for different things that we're doing. When you have a wet dough like this, don't think you can, okay, we'll mix it up and then we'll put it on the bench and we'll add more flour to it. We're adding unhydrated flour to that dough. And it will definitely have a texture difference and a taste difference when you go to eat that roll. You think, okay, I have a wet dough and I can just keep putting flour on my bench. You're not letting that flour be hydrated by the egg and the butter and the water, or the egg and the butter and the milk to a place. So you want your flour in there. We'll dust with a little bit, but we always want to use minimal on the bench as we're dusting or shaking.
So it's cleaning the bowl, and I'm letting it go now, so it's doing fine. That was an addition of about 1.5 ounces of flour. All right, so we're moving on. This is working. That's working down there. Now our compost from yesterday. We're going to divide it in half, and as the recipe described, about 3 pounds, 1 to 2 ounces. We're going to divide it in half. Okay, so 2 pounds, 15.8 ounces. So it's almost there. Okay. 3 pounds, 3 ounces. So I take about an ounce and a half off of this dough, 2 off of this dough. Now I've got 2 even more. Okay. Within an ounce, it's fine. So with that said, we're going to go ahead with the sheeter. We'll start to show you how to sheet the dough. We're going to lock in the butter, and then we're going to give it 3/3-fold. It's a process. Anytime you hear the word lamination, it's a process. Okay? We have to make the dough ahead of time. We have to lock in the butter. We give it a first 3-fold, then we let it rest. So the gluten relaxes, the butter chills back up, sheet it again. 3/3-folds. After we give it the second fold, we have to let it relax 20 to 30 minutes every time. So right there, just by laminating it, it's going to take about an hour to an hour and a half. Okay? So it needs to be kind of sooner than later that you start the process. Okay. So it's coming together pretty nicely. It's just a little bit tacky on the bottom, but that's okay. All right. So this is the dough. It's getting smooth. Remember how rough it was looking before? Starting to get nice and smooth. Now we're going to look for a window pane, and we're going to look for yeast. 2 things. Take a big piece of dough. All right. So we're going to gently pull it, stretch it, pull it, stretch it, pull it. When this happens, okay, when it rips kind of quickly and easily, that means it hasn't developed enough gluten. Okay. So when you gently pull it out, stretch it, pull it out, stretch it, you're looking for that translucent so you can see the light through it, okay, and see that webbing, okay. It's getting there, it's close, but it's just ripping a little too easily over here. So we're going to let it develop a little more gluten. At the same time, you're looking for that yeast. I don't see any yeast. It looks pretty good. Okay. You see little specks of yeast. But these holes, that's what concerns me. It needs a little more development. And I'll show you that after maybe a minute, minute and a half more, it'll get stronger. But I don't see any yeast cells, so that means I'm good there. Everything else looks good. It cleans the side of the bowl. I'm going to give it another minute.
Okay, I've got the last one at 1.2. Now what do I do with this? Because the rest of these are 1.5. I'm going to cut it up. I'm going to add 1 little piece of all of these so we don't have any leftover dough. Now that's going to increase the weight of these to about 1.7, 1.8. But as long as I have a uniform weight with these, why do we need them uniform size and weight?
So they bake evenly?
So they bake evenly. They all bake at the same time. We don't have ones that are in there that are 2 ounces and ones that are 1 ounces. The 2 ounces are going to take longer. always have baking 160 in here. Have to make pretzels. Yes. And this is where my spritz bottle would come into play. I can already feel skin starting to develop on these. So you have to work quickly. You've got 20, 30, 40 to 50 of these. I'm looking at my dough if I had seams coming around. Ladies, if I have seams coming around the outside, I want to make sure that I have a nice smooth exterior so I don't have a seam coming off there. Now, one of the things that we're also doing right now is we're tightening the gluten. Fold it, unfold it, it's going to tighten the gluten. As I roll them, it's tightening the gluten. So if I went right away from this into the shaping of the rolls, the dough is not going to stretch as much. We need to let it rest. You saw the croissant dough as it tightened up, as he was rolling it. That's the gluten tightening it up. You need to let that gluten relax. If you have too much flour on your bench, it's just going to scoot around, and it doesn't have any friction to actually make that shape. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we want to let those rest 5, 7 minutes. Just cover them up with Chef Donatelli's. There we go. Okay, and then you guys got one of these, got a sheet of one of these on Moodle or printed it out. So we've got single knot rolls, figure 8 rolls, double knot rolls, and braided rolls. The single knot, once you get that one down, it's fairly straightforward. We're going to stretch our dough out into an elongated piece, and then we're just going to tie what I call the old single granny knot. You just run it through, and that's your single knot roll. After you do that, it goes on the sheet tray with parchment paper, and you're done with it. The double knot, and we'll go through all these. The double knot, same premise, tying the knot, but we're looping that extra piece back in through the center, so we get a double knot roll. This is about appearances. You never want to just send out a round roll. Put a little effort into it, put a little work into it. I guess the customer eats with their eyes first when it's a nice presentation, a nice basket, or service, table service, the server comes over and puts the bread on the basket itself. It's just a nice presentation. The figure 8 rolls, literally like tying a figure 8 knot in the climbers out there. It's just a nice presentation. And then the braided roll itself, it elongates it a little bit. I always found the braided rolls just a beautiful presentation in a bread basket or on display somewhere. Even with larger loaves, you can roll those out and make a larger braided roll loaf with that. And if I tried to roll these out right now, they're just going to tear because the glute's too tight. No rolling pin needed. We're actually just going to make an elongated piece of dough that we're going to twist into a single knot. So, just your hand on the bench. And when we're making small rolls like these, the seam, once you start rolling like this, the seam is pretty much just going to disappear. don't know if you can see when I do that. See the dough springing back? That's the glue. So that's why we have to rest these. We want to try to keep a uniform and consistent width all the way through, so you don't have little thick spots or big thick spots or thin spots. I'm putting pressure on the center. We're going to do this with the baguettes too. And as I'm pushing down, I'm pulling a little bit, not tearing it, but I'm running my hands to the exterior of the dough, elongating it, elongating it. Grissini sticks as well, you'll be doing this. Choose to do one of those for a hard bread basket.
Chef, are you using your fingertips or your palms?
I'm using both. And I'm really only using about from the middle of my middle digit down to about the middle of my hand. Because I don't want to put too much pressure on it with my palms, because I flatten it. There's also the thought on the very ends. We want them more rounded than almost like a spike. Just nicer presentation when we actually start to roll these. So a single knot roll, just like you're tying your shoes. And that's our single knot. This little edge piece that came off, you don't want to leave that hanging because that's going to bake as well. Just give it a little tuck. A little bit of water helps. Just a little tuck, and there's our single knot roll.